The title is either Trance as Pursuit of Eudaimonia. I pronounce it like that because I've got Greek friends, but it's a dead language, so basically we can do whatever we like. Or you can say Trance as the Pursuit of Ethics, which makes it more accessible. I will explore the idea that trance can be read as an ethical notion relating to the establishment of eudaimonia, or a good life. To read trance as such will give some consequences for theory formation and possibilities for politics. The starting point of my paper is the much quoted definition of trance from Stryker 2008, and that is, and I quote, people who move away from the gender they were assigned at birth, people who cross over the boundaries constructed by their culture to define and contain that gender. As Enke 2013 argues, describing trance like this has the effect of making it a procedural and not an epistemic category. Or in other words, trance moves from something you are to something you do. Accepting this on Enke's terms, it creates the following problem. Cis becomes a stable identity and only trance is on the move. This reinforces a certain binary, cis-trance, which creates a state of exceptionalism surrounding trance, while simultaneously lending to cis an unquestioned stability. Cis stability need not to be explained anymore, while trance remains a non-normative oddity. The problem of being a non-normative category is that the duress one receives is legitimized through the exceptionality of the movement of the category, while the normative category is legitimized in its excluding power. A strategy to counter this is to reread both categories to behave in like-minded ways. Hereby we create a theory whereby cis moves within a social boundary, while trans moves across this, and it can be defended, as I hope to show below. One of the problems of the trans discussion is that while trans starts out as an agential procedure, it gets treated as a stable category. This is due to the inherent logic of the logistics of Foucault's influence of thinking about subjects. Subjects are produced, which is a movement, which makes them stable subjects, a category. And I follow Parisi and Terranova in their 2000 article here. By baking we make bread, and so through transing we become trans, but not yet by cissing we become cis. That's a bit the problem. I'll put it on the table. By moving trans from being to doing trans, trans effectively moves out of the realm of recognition into the realm of ethics. Recognition is about being seen for what one really is, and ethics is about doing actions that are aimed at forming life worlds. Focusing on non-normativity within ethics, we can explore what movement means for trans and consequently can see if it applies to cis. Hereby we keep agents moving and thus remove stability as recognition from the equation. In queer affect theory, the question to the non-normative ethics as the formation of a good life is debated, for instance, through the works of Braidotti, 2000, who says, yes, this is all possible. Or Ahmed, 2010, who says, no, this is not at all possible. Or Berland, 2011, who says, yeah, we can aim for it, but we end up worse off. So it is, non-normative ethics is kind of a lively field at the moment. Reading this affective non-normative ethics through the lens of the non-normative procedure that is trans brings me to a reading of Aristotle. Sorry. I come through Aristotle through the discussion of the possibility of happiness in Sarah Ahmed's work, but more so through the work of Rosie Braidotti, who champions aiming at a good life with trans as the post-human topos in her 2013 book. Braidotti draws for her discussion on Irigarean legacy, and Irigaray draws for her insights partly on Aristotle, though with other conclusions than Braidotti has. Aristotle is famously seen as conservative, but I will argue that he can be read differently, and also that this gives interesting consequences for trans. Aristotle's rendering of ethics as the creation of eudaimonia from the first personal perspective of the agent can be read as forming a disposition that gives meaningful shape to the world and the actions taken in that world in order to live a life that seems blessed. And, bless you. And blessed is a translation of makarion, and that is not good, but it's sort of thriving. I follow Arendt's 1958 translation here. Blessedness, instead of a modern goodness, need not to be read as always going well or an emotive happy. Don't confuse that. Agents are simply people that can do actions and have a measure of opting into possibilities as a way of plotting their life course, though not, as Nussbaum 1987 cogently argues, marked in the absence of bad luck, or live a life that is fully under the agent's own control. However, Aristotle's agency as phronesis is about the concrete possibility of realizing value in particular situations, combined with a general insight about what is valuable, following Lovibond 2002. It has an evaluative and a practical side. This is obviously challenging from a non-normative perspective, since what is valuable needs to be discovered, invented, or negotiated. Gender as decision. A disposition is a decision-generating state of the soul. The soul here is anima, and that anima is that what makes us move. A disposition is situated next to affections, appetite, fear, etc., and capacities, capable of becoming angry, etc., etc., Nicomachean ethics. According to Hutchinson, 1986, a disposition is simply the arrangements of the part of a complex thing. And added by Lovibond, 2002, is also the propensity to behave in a certain way. The formation of a worthwhile disposition in the Aristotelian framework is done by focusing within the action on the intermediate as a middle point between two extremes. And I quote, "Now, with everything continuous and divisible, it is possible to take a greater and a lesser and an equal amount, and these with either reference to the object itself or relative to us. Whereas by the intermediate relative to us, I mean the sort of thing that neither goes to excess or is deficient. And this is not one thing, nor is it the same for all." Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, Book 2, Chapter 6. The two most important things for the discussions are that dispositions can be seen to grow out of continuous and divisible states of being that are nevertheless agent-dependent. That means that the intermediate is agent-relative and found in action and not in calculation or rationality, but gets found through affect. These actions shape dispositions further, which in turn form perceptions of situations and are feeding back into activity, because dispositions are used to start up actions. Simply said, one becomes just as disposition by doing just actions. Or as Aristotle phrases it, one becomes a good builder by building well, and one becomes a bad builder by building badly. This building of dispositions is done upon capacities and sensibilities that are already ingrained in an agent, meaning nothing really more spectacular than that we are susceptible to certain things like smells, or are more color aware, or are more introvert or extrovert to a certain extent, see suffering faster or slower. It also means that some people are stronger and others are more speedy. Some know how to calculate better and others have a fine eye for the movement of animals. It is nothing really big. However, dispositions form and direct some of the capacities, make people more sensitive in one direction or another, without subsuming all agents to the same possibilities. The formation of dispositions comes thus with a component directed to actions, as well as a component directed to sensibilities. These are never separated, and I think this is very meaningful and can be used to explain a lot of problems that objective or realist accounts cannot reach. And also, this can be used to both branch into a certain intersectionality as well as escape a too confining branch of intersectionality. Returning briefly to dispositions as divisible continuum, these are not necessarily read by all agents in the same way. As Aristotle draws attention to how comparisons work, and I quote, "This is why those at either extreme try to distance themselves from the one between them, associating him with the other extreme. This being the way these things are opposed to each other, there is most contrariety between those at the extremes. more than between them and the intermediate, for they stand further away from each other than they do from the intermediate. Mijke in Ethics, Book 2, Chapter 8, if you want to ever read it. Reading this through the notion of gender as intermediate from a specific angle, we can see how everybody falling outside of a dichotomy can appear to be a dysfunctional version of the other extreme. The view of the outer ends being part of a continuum comes into view only from the perspective of the intermediate, which is what causes a large part of misidentification within binary thinking, where there is merely the other option. Lovibond equally calls attention to dispositions coming in various higher order, more complex, and lower order, less complex, as defined character traits, or a more complex rendering of personality as a whole in 2002, page 31, lending further plausibility to gender as a complex disposition with perceptive and active components. Having already established trans as a procedure through the definition of Stryker and Enke, it might have already become apparent why trans can be seen to be an ethical undertaking. Trans in this reading is based on a certain materiality that can give rise to certain susceptibilities without having to worry about what is deeply ingrained in the material body, while still being open to agency as formation of one's gender as execution as well as gendered susceptibilities. What is of importance in this reading is that the non-rational part of the soul, where we develop our characteristics, is open to habituation and decisions, contra to some more essentialist readings of hylomorphism in Aristotle, for instance by Butler in 1994. Aristotle compares the formation of dispositions to navigation, various points in the Nicomachean Ethics, and setting a course as aiming at certain ends. Navigation is something that happens always in the present, as the sea is a combination of wind, fluidity, water and currents, etc. To reach an end, one has to set course again and again and again. It is sailing, but it's also navigating a changing vessel. The agent becomes a different vessel over time as they grow more towards any end. The navigation becomes perhaps more skillful, but also starts to require different routes. What is just for a young adolescent is not necessarily just for a middle-aged adult. And this partly means that one never reaches a stability, but remains fluid and open to change throughout life, though habituations can obviously still settle. Since the formations of dispositions are agent relative, Aristotle, instead of a conservative, becomes a champion for multiplicity. If agent A performs a just action that is just according to the agent, it can be the case that the just action does not get read as such by somebody else. Their sensibilities and capacities may differ, and their habituations might go in different directions, making the other unreadable, as we have seen in the above quote earlier. This is a radically pluralist approach, and applied to gender, it might mean that everybody gets to have their own gender. Within this reading, we come to a difficult problem, namely, we run the risk of solipsism, as is the big problem with phenomenology in general. If everything is agent-dependent, exchange is difficult or impossible, and our perception cannot relevantly match. Our agency becomes incompossible in this sense. Luckily, there is a way out. Eudaimonia literally means the thriving of the daimon that accompanies one throughout life, in the translations of both Nussbaum 1987 and Arendt 1958. The daimon is standing behind the agent and cannot be seen by the agent, but only by their company. So, while the agent is proprioceptively negotiating their intermediate position in action, and there is nobody else that can do that for an agent, because doing is always first personal, the community sees the agent doing well or not, and will react to that affectively or reflectively. The community gets explained through the Aristotelian framework in two ways. One, as the supportive peers in a wide conception of friendship in Aristotle, or two, as the incomprehending arbiters in the wide conception of polis in Aristotle. For non-normative agents, this gives us a double problem. It is lack of supportive peers in non-normative positions, and this comes linked with the duress one receives from the mainstream, which can give one a false feeling of non-thriving and also of exceptionalism, leading possibly to adjusting actions and shaping undesired dispositions. as well as, of course, it leads to actual forms of duress. Aristotle talks in this respect about corrective punishment as a form of medication both in Evdemian ethics and the Nicomachean ethics. Deviancy gets punished by being corrected and being brought back in line. Even Aristotle says in the Evdemian ethics, and I quote, "The holders of such views are in need not of arguments, but of maturity in which to change their opinions, or else of correction of a civil or medical kind. For medical treatment is no less a form of correction than flogging is." For people that had a disruptively irritating time at the gender clinic, this must certainly ring true. As we saw earlier, Aristotle is also committed to a strong pluralistic idea of multiplicity and agent dependency. This seemingly creates a paradox when combined with this social pressure, and one that neoconservative readers of Aristotle, for instance people like Michael Sandel and Alasdair MacIntyre, big names in the field in philosophy, need not solve. They can safely sit in mainstream and read Aristotle as protective of mainstream environments. I want to solve this, so I have to take another step. Partly the solution to the corrective punishment and the agent dependency lies in politics, claiming the space where we negotiate about what is just or fair or what is unjust or unfair. We have at this moment not a lot of grip to deal with right or wrong, because we need to re-establish the terms in a more pluralistic rendering than neo-Kantian discourses allow. From an agential perspective, the solution to the problem of mainstream duress and affirmative courses of action lies with each other. For non-normative agents, the non-normative community is of importance because there one can negotiate about ends, means, and have the power to focus on the wrong ends without getting blamed for it. This comes to the fore in a navigation metaphor. As agent, one sets course, but in the course of coursing, one changes their course as well due to new insights. As non-normative agent, to set a course in a changing vessel is a problem due to the invisibility of possible routes. As we have seen, to be just requires doing just things. But how does one deal with becoming a non-normative gender when the gender is out of sight? By looking at each other's demons and learning from each other's thriving is not only a way out of the general problem of solipsism, but the acknowledgement of demons can also enhance non-normative cooperation and solidarity through mutual support, and thus gender remains primarily a social disposition. Irigaray, in The Ethics of Sexual Difference, describes in her binary take the demon as the intermediate space, where the reading of demons becomes the intermediate between two solids, man-woman or God-human. Through a close reading of Aristotle, trans can be read as a procedure, as all genders, which then become an intermediate between two fluids, extreme states that are agent-dependent. Through the Arendtian lens, the Irigarean demon becomes a further step towards the fluidity of the demonesque. The intermediacy is not only in the agent, but is fluidity operative in the community and between the community of the agents as well. This makes gender, as last step, as much as non-normative gender, a social engagement of development and formation. Trans stops being exceptional as such, and is only seen as exceptional because of its border-crossing state, explicitly drawing back to the Stryker definition. De-exceptionalizing trans gives a new incentive to politics of gender, countering essentialist notions, not by direct denial, which I not always find very useful, but by stressing the need for the establishment of a diversity of practices. Even if this happens on a felt essence, that is completely fine, there's no problem in that at all. By focusing on the material needs of gender formation as a necessary ingredient of ethics, trans can be a focus point for politics of liberation. The non-normative striving makes bonds with other non-normative focus points necessary for a fair politics. Trans can hereby avoid the criticisms that are directed against a gay rights movement, which focuses on equality, leaving other forms of normalizing and excluding power in place, following Spade 2011 and Hunter forthcoming. To call gender a decision is of course a bit pushing it. Dispositions are slowly forming processes that shape a view of the world in a certain way and execute actions in a certain manner as a contribution to a good life. Rendered simply, It is the argument that what I do shapes what I find important, that action and perception are explicitly intertwined. These gendered patterns do not imply that all gender variants have an equal access to a good life. Some forms of genderedness are unfortunately about supporting somebody else's vision of the good life. However, as soon as one starts to trans, new perspectives can come into view. And with these new perspectives, new ethics can be built and can be further extended, overflowing to new life worlds. Shaping new forms of genderedness is indeed as difficult as building new life worlds, but no one, since Aristotle, has ever claimed that ethics is easy. By reading trans as ethics, new routes for exploring solidarity and cooperation are opened. Simultaneously, moving trans from being to doing gives new possibilities to look at duress instead of oppression, first being about practical interactions, secondly about necessary categories, which moves trans from a rights-based framework to a framework based on actual possibilities. Lastly, reading trans through this Aristotelian lens gives the opportunity to stop being delivered to a state of trance and regain and retain agency for one's actions. This can not only counter pathologization, but puts the trans agent on par with any cis agent. De-exceptionalizing trans allows for the articulation of a viable politics of possibility that can be used to build alliances with other groups in order to counter neoliberal duress and confinement within mainstream lives.